The knock on my bedroom door came just after midnight. At the exact moment, the city seemed to stop breathing. Outside, the heat wave had turned every apartment into an oven, and inside our old building, even the walls felt hot enough to burn. When I opened the door, I found my roommate standing there exhausted, wrapped in a robe with damp hair sticking to her forehead. Her air conditioner had finally given up after struggling for days, and she looked like someone who had spent hours fighting a battle. She knew she couldn't win. She quietly asked if she could sleep in my room, because it was the only place left in the apartment that was still cool. Looking into her tired eyes, I realized this night was about far more than escaping the heat. It was about discovering how a single act of kindness can quietly change 2 lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, compassion, and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner for more emotional stories that remind us of the good still left in the world. When she first moved into the apartment 6 months earlier, we had been nothing more than strangers sharing rent. We respected each other's space, split the grocery bills, and exchanged polite greetings before disappearing into our separate lives. She worked long shifts at the local hospital, while I spent my days working remotely as a graphic designer. We occupied the same apartment without ever truly knowing each other. Sometimes we crossed paths in the kitchen while making coffee before sunrise. Sometimes we'd exchange brief conversations about the weather, or whether the landlord would ever fix the leaking faucet. Beyond that, our lives stayed carefully separated. Then the worst heat wave our city had seen in decades arrived. Temperatures climbed higher every day, breaking records and overwhelming power grids across the neighborhood. News stations warned elderly residents to stay indoors, cooling centers filled beyond capacity, and every repair company was booked for weeks. One by one, old air conditioners surrendered to the relentless heat. Ours kept running until late that evening, when the unit in her bedroom suddenly stopped with a loud metallic groan before falling completely silent. She tried everything she could think of. She reset the breaker, cleaned the filter, and even called the emergency maintenance number, only to learn that no technician could come before the weekend. It was only Tuesday. I looked at her standing in my doorway, embarrassed even to ask for help. She apologized several times before I could answer, explaining that she had to be back at the hospital by 6 inches the morning and desperately needed a few hours of sleep. I simply stepped aside and told her the room was big enough for both of us. I pulled an old camping mattress from the closet, laid fresh blankets across it, and pointed the fan toward her side of the room. It wasn't perfect, but it was cool. That night, neither of us slept much. Instead, we found ourselves talking quietly in the darkness while the air conditioner hummed steadily above us. Without the distractions of work or television, the silence invited honesty. She spoke about becoming a nurse after losing her father during a medical emergency years earlier. She admitted that every patient reminded her why she had chosen such a difficult profession. I shared how losing my own job during the pandemic had forced me to rebuild my career from scratch. Somewhere between those conversations, 2 roommates slowly became friends. Over the following days, the arrangement continued. Every evening after work, we'd eat simple dinners together before retreating to the cool bedroom, while the rest of the apartment remained unbearably hot. We laughed over childhood stories, compared embarrassing mistakes, and slowly discovered how much loneliness both of us had been carrying without realizing it. Living together had never truly meant sharing our lives until circumstances forced us into the same room. One evening, she returned home looking more exhausted than ever. The emergency room had been overflowing with patients, suffering from dehydration and heat stroke. She quietly admitted that despite spending her days caring for everyone else, she often felt like no one noticed when she herself was struggling. Those words stayed with me long after she fell asleep. The next morning, I called in a favor from an old college friend who repaired HVAC system. Although he normally worked outside the city, he agreed to stop by after hearing about the situation. By evening, cool air was flowing through her bedroom once again. She stood in the doorway smiling with tears in her eyes, insisting she would repay every dollar. I shook my head because some kindness doesn't belong on an invoice. What surprised me most wasn't how grateful she was, it was how empty the apartment suddenly felt. The shared evenings that had become our routine were over. We returned to our separate rooms, yet something important had changed. The walls that once divided strangers no longer seemed quite so solid. Weeks later, another knock came at my door. This time it wasn't because something had broken. She had cooked dinner for both of us to celebrate surviving the hottest summer either of us could remember. We sat around our tiny kitchen table for hours, laughing about how an old broken air conditioner had accidentally introduced 2 people who had been living only a few feet apart all along. As the months passed, our friendship continued to grow. We celebrated birthdays together, helped each other through difficult days, and learned that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's created through small choices, repeated over time. Sometimes it's built when someone opens a door without asking for anything in return. Years later, after we had both moved into different homes and different chapters of life, people often asked how we became such close friends. We always smiled at the same memory. It wasn't a dramatic rescue or an unforgettable vacation. It was simply one unbearably hot night when kindness mattered more than convenience, and compassion quietly changed the direction of 2 ordinary lives. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and help us spread more stories that remind the world that simple acts of compassion still matter. Special request, before you leave, please comment with one small act of kindness someone showed you that you'll never forget. Because sometimes the moments that seem the smallest, a knock on a door, a room shared for one difficult night, or a simple yes, when someone needs help, become the memories that stay with us forever. In the end, it wasn't the heat wave either of us remembered most. It was the quiet reminder that even in the hardest seasons of life, kindness has a way of creating a home where strangers can become lifelong friends.